Hey man, there's a truth few men are willing to admit out loud, yet it's becoming more undeniable with every passing year. The longer a man stays single, the stronger he becomes. Not because relationships are inherently bad, but because solitude carves out something that few men ever get the chance to experience: total ownership of themselves. When a man spends long stretches of his life without the constant pull of a woman's validation or the distractions of a relationship, he begins to build a foundation of strength rooted in independence, clarity, and self-mastery. It's in that space of silence where his true power begins to take shape. See, when a man is single, he isn't negotiating his time, his energy, or his ambitions around someone else's shifting emotions. He wakes up and moves according to his own vision. If he wants to grind, he grinds. If he wants to rest, he rests. If he wants to take risks, he doesn't have to ask permission or explain himself. This autonomy isn't selfishness, it's freedom. And freedom is the soil where masculine strength grows. Every decision he makes reinforces his ability to trust himself. Every win, every loss, every hard-earned lesson belongs to him alone. That's how resilience is built, not by leaning on someone else, but by standing tall in solitude. The longer a man remains single, the sharper his focus becomes. Most men waste years trying to chase women, trying to please them, or trying to bend their lives around a relationship that doesn't even serve them. But the man who stays single harnesses all of that energy and invests it into himself. He builds his career, strengthens his body, grows his knowledge, and sharpens his mind. Instead of scattering his attention on fleeting romantic highs, he channels it into pursuits that last. And with each day he does this, he widens the gap between himself and the man who is dependent on a woman for purpose. That gap is power. There's also something else that happens when a man is alone for long enough. He learns to master his emotions. See, most men rely on women for comfort, validation, or distraction from their inner chaos. But the man who embraces solitude has no such escape. He's forced to confront his own demons head-on. He learns to regulate his frustration, to channel his anger, to soothe his insecurities without anyone holding his hand. That process is brutal, but it forges him into someone unshakable. By the time he does re-enter the world of women, he's no longer easily manipulated by tears, silence, or threats of abandonment. He has sat in the fire long enough to come out steel. And here's the hidden truth. Women can feel it when a man has built himself in solitude. They sense it in his calm, in his unhurried movements, in the way he doesn't need them to feel whole. That kind of man carries an energy that is magnetic because it's rare. Most men bend, beg, and break for women's attention, but the man who has stayed single long enough to discover his strength walks differently. He isn't chasing, he isn't pleading, he isn't performing. He already knows who he is. And ironically, it's that self-contained energy that makes women crave him the most, because women are drawn to men they cannot fully control. The man who spends enough time single inevitably learns discipline in a way that most men never will. Without the constant distractions of trying to maintain a relationship, he's left with himself, and that's where the real battle begins. He starts to refine his habits, not for the sake of impressing someone, but because he recognizes the cost of living undisciplined. He wakes up earlier, he eats cleaner, he trains harder, he saves more, and he becomes accountable to his own vision of success. Over time, this discipline turns into second nature, and it's precisely that consistency that separates him from the masses of men who remain stuck in cycles of dependence and mediocrity. Emotional control is another weapon forged in solitude. When a man is single, he doesn't have the constant emotional roller coaster of a relationship pushing him into highs and lows. He has the stillness to observe himself, to sit with his own thoughts, and to learn how to regulate without external reassurance. This is where he discovers that calm is a choice, not an accident. Over months and years, that emotional control becomes part of his character, and it radiates outward. When others panic, he's composed. When others react, he pauses. When others beg, he holds his ground. That level of control is rare, and in a world of chaos, it makes him invaluable. The longer he stays single, the higher his standards rise, not just for women, but for life itself. He no longer tolerates environments, habits, or relationships that drain him. He doesn't chase after temporary thrills because he's seen firsthand the strength that comes from building something lasting. When he finally does consider a woman, it's not because he's desperate or lonely, but because she adds value to an already complete life. That shift is powerful. It turns him from a man who needs women into a man who chooses them, and choice is where true masculine leverage is born. Ironically, the more single he remains, the less lonely he feels. That's the paradox most don't understand. Loneliness is a product of needing external validation. But once a man learns to validate himself, once he discovers purpose, once he finds meaning in his mission, solitude no longer feels empty, it feels liberating. He doesn't seek out noise just to fill the silence. He doesn't settle for shallow company out of fear of being alone. He sits in his own presence like a king in his castle, aware that everything he needs, he can build himself. And that aura, the aura of a man content with nothing but his own energy, is intoxicating to anyone who encounters it. And when the world finally does test him, when challenges arise, when setbacks hit, he doesn't crumble like the man who's never known solitude. He doesn't reach for someone else to save him, because he has already proven to himself that he can endure. He's been through the lonely nights, the doubts, the temptations, and he's come out stronger on the other side. That experience becomes a shield no one can take away from him. And so when life demands strength, he doesn't have to summon it. It's already who he is. That's why the longer a man stays single, the stronger he becomes. He isn't untested. He's been tested by silence itself, and silence has made him unbreakable. As more time passes, a man who remains single starts to sharpen his instincts in ways most men never will. He isn't constantly distracted by emotional noise or pulled into someone else's narrative, so he begins to notice patterns in behavior, in body language, in the unspoken cues people give off. His eyes catch things others miss. His ears tune into tones others overlook. He knows when someone is being genuine and when they're putting on an act. He knows when respect is real and when it's conditional. This heightened awareness is born from observation, from being an outsider who studies rather than someone constantly drowning in relationship drama. And with those instincts, he avoids traps that ruin weaker men. Over time, his aura changes. There's something about a man who's comfortable in his own skin, who doesn't chase, who doesn't flinch, who doesn't need. That aura is magnetic, even if he doesn't try to project it. Women sense it, men sense it, everyone feels it. It's the energy of self-reliance. It's the quiet confidence of someone who isn't looking for approval. It's not loud, it's not arrogant, it's controlled. And in a world full of men desperate to be seen, this man's refusal to perform makes him stand out more than anyone shouting for attention ever could. The longer he walks this path, the more he realizes he doesn't need to chase validation. In fact, it flips. Validation starts to chase him. Opportunities come his way. Women notice him more. Respect follows him. Not because he begged for it, but because people are naturally drawn to those who carry themselves with weight. That's the irony. The men who want attention most never get it, while the men who need nothing are surrounded by it. This is why single men who embrace solitude often find themselves more admired and pursued than men who waste years trying to prove their worth. Strength attracts, silence intrigues, and independence commands. But here's where it gets even more powerful. His energy becomes harder to access, and that scarcity is what amplifies its value. He doesn't make himself available at every whim. He doesn't rearrange his life just to be seen. He lives on his own terms, and anyone who wants to be in his world must rise to his standard. This scarcity mindset creates natural respect. People understand that his time is precious, his energy is selective, and his presence is not free. That boundary alone eliminates games, filters out manipulators, and ensures that only those who truly value him stay close. What most fail to understand is that a man who thrives in singleness isn't hard because he's cold or bitter. He's hard because he's forged through trial. He's tasted emptiness, he's faced loneliness, and he's learned to carry it without collapsing. That's why his strength feels unshakable. It was built in silence, and when he finally does choose to open up, when he finally lets someone in, it's not from a place of weakness, but from abundance. He isn't giving out of desperation, he's giving because he wants to. And that difference is everything, because the man who needs is enslaved, but the man who chooses is free. When women encounter a man like this, the reaction is almost primal. On one hand, they're drawn to him in a way they can't fully explain. He doesn't try to impress, he doesn't beg for attention, and he doesn't even seem to notice when others are seeking his approval, and that mystery pulls them in. On the other hand, his self-sufficiency terrifies them because it makes them realize they hold no leverage over him. They can't dangle affection, they can't weaponize withdrawal, they can't play the usual games that work on weaker men. His strength exposes their patterns, and once a man refuses to play the game loses all its power. This is why women often test these men harder than anyone else. They poke, they provoke, They try to create situations to see if he will break character. They might pull away just to see if he chases, or act cold to see if he cracks. But when he doesn't flinch, when he continues on his path as if nothing has changed, it rattles them to the core. Because it proves that his strength isn't an act, it's who he is. And while that frustrates them, it also commands their deepest respect. Women don't admit this openly, but they admire a man most when they realize they cannot control him. The longer a man stays single and builds this unshakable frame, the more he learns a key truth. Attraction is not about giving women what they ask for, it's about being who they can't ignore. And the man who walks alone is impossible to ignore, because he radiates something most men have lost: sovereignty. He doesn't live for approval, he doesn't alter himself to be chosen, he doesn't barter his dignity for affection. Instead, he stands firm, and the world adjusts around him. That type of presence is what creates real desire, because it's rare. It's not manufactured confidence, it's lived strength. Another reality is this: when a man is truly independent, his value multiplies with time. Every year he spends focused on himself, sharpening his mind, expanding his resources, strengthening his body, mastering his emotions, he becomes more dangerous in the best way possible. He becomes the type of man who is not only wanted, but needed, and this is where the roles reverse. Suddenly, the very women who overlooked him before start to notice him again. They see what he has built, they feel the weight of his presence, and they realize he is no longer a man they can easily access. He's evolved past their reach, and that shift creates both regret and longing. The beauty of this transformation is that it's not about women at all, it's about him. A man who stays single long enough discovers that fulfillment doesn't come from being chosen, it comes from choosing himself. And that realization is liberation, because once he's free from the need to be validated, he can finally love, work, and live without desperation. He no longer clings to anyone or anything. He doesn't fear loss because he knows he is enough on his own. And ironically, that's what makes him irresistible, because the man who doesn't need love to survive is the only man truly capable of giving it without losing himself. The ripple effect of men choosing this path of solitude and self-mastery is bigger than most people realize. It's not just about personal growth. It's a shift that unsettles the very foundation of modern relationships. Society has long depended on men who are willing to throw themselves into the fire for validation, to sacrifice their time, their energy, and their stability in exchange for the fleeting comfort of female approval. But when more men refuse to play that role, when they start prioritizing their own lives over the illusions being sold to them, it shakes the dynamic completely. Women begin to panic because the supply of men willing to chase, to overextend, to pour endlessly into them without reciprocity begins to dwindle. And that panic turns into confusion, because the game only works if men are desperate enough to play it. When men stop caring, the script collapses, and that's when women realize they can no longer depend on manipulation to sustain attraction. As men grow stronger in their solitude, another shift occurs. They begin to view relationships not as a necessity, but as a choice. And that distinction changes everything. A man who believes he needs a woman to complete him is vulnerable. He'll overlook red flags, tolerate disrespect, and compromise on his own standards just to keep her around. But a man who has built a life where his happiness, his peace, and his fulfillment already exist, independent of anyone else, he is no longer bargaining from weakness. He is interviewing, not begging. He is selective, not desperate, and women sense this difference immediately. It's in his eyes, his posture, his decisions. He doesn't move from fear of loss, he moves from abundance of self. That makes him 10 times harder to secure, because his value is now set by his standards, not by his hunger. This is why society often labels single strong men as cold or unrealistic. It's not because these men are bitter, it's because they have stopped allowing themselves to be exploited. A man who refuses to give everything without discernment is dangerous to the system. He won't be easily manipulated by guilt, he won't be swayed by flattery, and he won't be trapped by shallow promises. He evaluates every connection through the lens of respect and reciprocity. And because his value is already established, he doesn't flinch if someone walks away. That level of composure unnerves people, especially women who are used to men who fold under emotional pressure. They can't admit it, but what they feel is a mixture of admiration and frustration, because deep down, they know this man cannot be broken the way others can. But here's the paradox that makes it even more fascinating. The stronger and more independent a man becomes in his singleness, the more women are attracted to him. It's not his looks, his possessions, or even his words. It's the energy of detachment. The fact that he doesn't need them makes them want him more. It's human nature to crave what feels scarce, and the man who has learned to thrive without validation is the rarest thing in today's world. Women chase that energy, test it, and even sabotage it, but they can't deny it captivates them. And while weaker men exhaust themselves trying to earn attention, this man simply exists, and the attention finds him. That's the ultimate irony. The men who chase love lose themselves, while the men who never need it are the ones who draw it effortlessly. In the end, the man who stays single long enough to build himself fully becomes unrecognizable compared to who he was before. He is sharper, stronger, calmer, and infinitely more grounded. He is no longer swayed by emotional storms, no longer baited by temporary highs, and no longer enslaved to the fear of being alone. Instead, he commands his own space, and that command is what makes others bend toward him. He realizes that love, when it comes, is not supposed to drain him. It's supposed to complement what he has already built, and if it doesn't, he walks away without hesitation. Because the man who has mastered solitude knows that the greatest power is not in being needed, but in never needing anyone to validate who he is. When a man remains single long enough to harden his frame and sharpen his vision, he starts to see the dating landscape with terrifying clarity. He realizes that modern love is less about genuine connection and more about performance, illusion, and emotional leverage. He notices how most men are operating from weakness, constantly proving, constantly chasing, constantly lowering their standards in hopes of winning scraps of validation. And because he has removed himself from that race, he sees the chaos from a distance. It's like standing on the shore while everyone else is drowning in waves. They don't even know they're sinking, but he can see it clearly. This awareness makes him unshakable. He understands that if he ever chooses to step into that ocean, he must bring his own anchor, or he too will be swallowed by the tide of manipulation and unmet expectations. This realization breeds something even more valuable than confidence: patience. A man who has built himself doesn't need to jump at every opportunity, doesn't need to accept whoever shows him attention, and doesn't need to fear missing out. He is patient because he knows his value, and value waits for nothing. It attracts what is worthy. That patience unnerves women because they're accustomed to men rushing, pushing, and bending over backwards just to secure their affection. But when a man doesn't move out of urgency, when he sits back and evaluates rather than leaps blindly, it signals that he cannot be controlled by the oldest weapon women wield: scarcity. He knows that scarcity doesn't exist for a man of true worth, because opportunities always come to those who have built themselves into someone who cannot be ignored. This patience transforms into power. The longer he cultivates it, women begin to realize that their usual strategies, ignoring him, withdrawing affection, comparing him to other men, simply don't work. Instead of being pulled into emotional chaos, he responds with silence. Instead of chasing after validation, he invests deeper into his purpose, and instead of collapsing under pressure, he grows stronger. This creates a cycle where women are forced to reveal their truest selves quicker because they know games won't work. Either they step up and bring value, or they are dismissed without discussion. And this, ironically, is what women both fear and respect. They fear it because they lose control, but they respect it because it demands the best from them. For the first time, they must give something real instead of just extracting. But perhaps the most profound change is in how society itself reacts to such men. A man who cannot be manipulated is often labeled as difficult, emotionless, or even toxic by a culture that thrives on dependency. Why? Because his existence is a threat to a system that profits from weak men giving endlessly while receiving nothing in return. When a man demonstrates that he can walk away, that he can build a full life without bending to expectations, he exposes the fragile nature of those expectations. He becomes a mirror that reflects the truth back at everyone else. Most people are living lies, chasing illusions, and running from their own emptiness. And that exposure makes him dangerous, not because he is cruel, but because he reveals reality in a world addicted to fantasy. In the end, the longer a man remains single and focused, the stronger his essence becomes, not because he is untouched by loneliness, but because he has learned to master it. He has transformed solitude from something painful into something powerful. And when you turn pain into power, no one can take it from you. Women may come and go, society may change, but his foundation remains. That's why men like this command a unique kind of respect. They embody what every man secretly wishes for, but few ever achieve: freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from manipulation, freedom from the desperate hunger to be seen. And once you've tasted that freedom, you'll never go back. You'll never bow, never beg, never break. You'll stand in your reality, and the world will either rise to meet you or fade into irrelevance. Once a man reaches this level of self-mastery, every interaction he has with women changes in tone. He no longer approaches from a place of scarcity, nor does he feel the pressure to win her over or prove his worth. Instead, his presence alone sets the frame, calm, unbothered, steady. Women immediately sense the difference because they're used to men overcompensating, scrambling to be noticed, and trying to fit into their world. But this man doesn't move like that. He doesn't enter her world, he invites her into his. And that shift in dynamics is so rare in modern dating that it disarms women completely. They can't manipulate him with silence. They can't pull him off balance with emotional swings, and they can't hold the threat of abandonment over him. He simply doesn't operate in that reality anymore. What this does is flip the script. Instead of him chasing, she's the one investing. She finds herself thinking about him more often, wondering what he's doing, hoping for his time and attention. His lack of need creates curiosity, and curiosity creates desire. Because when a man doesn't give himself away too easily, when he holds his ground and makes others earn his energy, women interpret that as proof of value. And deep down, they respect it, even if they don't admit it. They may call him distant or hard to read, but what they're really saying is that he's not trapped in their emotional games, and that independence terrifies them almost as much as it excites them. The truth is, women don't truly want men who give them everything up front. They want men who make them work for it. That's why the men who are too generous with their attention, too eager with their affection, and too willing to bend always end up being discarded. Women respect what they earn, not what's handed to them, and the man who has stayed single long enough to understand this plays by a different rulebook. He doesn't give without discernment. He doesn't chase validation. He lets his presence speak for itself, and only those willing to step up to his standard get to stay. This not only preserves his energy, but also forces women to show their true intentions, because you cannot fake loyalty or effort with a man who doesn't budge at empty words. This new dynamic also reveals something most men never see. Women secretly crave boundaries. They might resist them at first, they might test them relentlessly, but deep down, they feel safest and most drawn to men who hold firm lines. A man who lets her do whatever she wants without consequence may seem fun in the beginning, but over time she loses respect for him. She sees him as weak, as spineless, as a man who lacks the courage to stand on his own ground. But the man who calmly enforces his standards, who walks away at the first sign of disrespect, and who doesn't tolerate chaos, he awakens something primal in her. She respects him because he respects himself, and that respect breeds the only type of attraction that lasts. And here lies the irony. The very strength that makes women fear losing him is the same strength that draws them to him in the first place. His detachment, his boundaries, his independence, these aren't flaws, they're the foundation of his power. They make him the rare type of man who doesn't just talk about value but lives it. And because he no longer needs love to validate him, the love he gives, if he chooses to give it, becomes infinitely more powerful. It's not needy, it's not desperate, it's not conditional. It's love from a man who is already whole, already complete. And when a woman feels that, it shakes her, because she knows she's dealing with someone she cannot afford to lose. When a man has this level of independence and inner strength, women quickly realize they cannot treat him the way they treat other men. With weaker men, they can get away with disrespect, mood swings, and emotional manipulation because those men fear losing them too much to push back. But with this man, every act of chaos carries a consequence: distance. He doesn't argue, he doesn't plead, he doesn't fall into the trap of proving himself, he simply withdraws. And that silence is more powerful than 1,000 words. It forces her to confront the reality that she cannot shake him, that she cannot bend him, and that she is either going to rise to his standard or lose him completely. That pressure changes her behavior in ways she doesn't even consciously recognize. The longer she's around him, the more she notices how different she feels in his presence compared to other men. With them, she might have felt control, but with him, she feels both admiration and unease. Admiration because his stability gives her a sense of safety. He won't crumble when things get tough. He won't lose himself in her storms. Unease because she knows she can't manipulate him the way she could others. This tension creates a paradox in her emotions. She's drawn closer because he gives her what no one else can. security and leadership, yet she's also unsettled because she can't bend him to her will. That paradox is exactly what keeps her hooked, and here's where the long-term shift happens. Most relationships burn out because women grow bored of men they can control. Once she knows how you'll react, once she knows she can predict you, once she knows you'll tolerate anything, her respect for you evaporates. But the man who cannot be controlled never becomes predictable. He isn't reactive, he isn't easily swayed, and he isn't moved by the same old tricks. That unpredictability keeps her invested because it means she always has to bring her best self to the table. And in relationships, respect is the fuel for attraction. Without respect, love dies. But with respect, attraction grows stronger over time. This is why strong men keep women chasing for years, while weak men lose them in months. The beauty of this transformation is that it extends beyond romance. Women start treating him differently in every context. Friends, colleagues, even strangers sense that he isn't a man to play with. They notice it in how he carries himself, how he makes decisions, how he commands respect without demanding it. And because his energy is consistent everywhere, people naturally align themselves with his frame. Women especially feel this shift. They know when they meet a man who doesn't need them, and that knowledge forces them to act differently. They may test him at first, but once they see he truly means what he lives, they adjust. And in that adjustment, they give him what they rarely give anyone else: genuine loyalty. In the end, the man who learns to stand alone becomes the man who cannot be ignored. He doesn't beg for attention, yet he commands it. He doesn't need validation, yet he receives it. He doesn't fear loss, yet he is never truly without options. Women respect him, not because he chases, but because he doesn't. They admire him not because he tries to prove himself, but because he doesn't need to. And most importantly, they cannot forget him, because he's not like the rest. While other men fade into memory as quickly as they arrived, his presence lingers long after he's gone. That is the power of a man who has mastered himself. He becomes unforgettable, not because of what he gave, but because of what he refused to give away too easily. His essence, his strength, his soul. When a man refuses to bend, something profound happens. He starts to think generationally, while weaker men chase short-term validation, pouring themselves into women who don't even value them. The man who has mastered his solitude begins to focus on legacy. His vision stretches beyond the moment, beyond the fleeting emotions of relationships, and into the realm of impact. He asks himself, what am I building that will outlast me? What am I creating that no one can take away? This forward-thinking mindset sets him apart because most people live in reaction, not intention, and women sense it instantly. They know they're dealing with someone who doesn't just survive the present, but actively builds the future. That makes him rare, intimidating, and deeply attractive, because he's not living for today's high, he's structuring tomorrow's empire. This is where his discipline begins to pay dividends. While others waste years chasing fleeting affection, he invests that same energy into his body, his mind, his business, and his purpose, and the results compound. Each year of solitude doesn't weaken him, it multiplies him. He becomes sharper, stronger, and harder to replace. By the time women realize his worth, he has already built so much that their approval becomes irrelevant. And ironically, it's at that exact moment, when he no longer needs validation, that validation comes flooding in. Women who overlooked him now circle back, but he views them with clarity. He no longer sees them through the lens of desire, he sees them through the lens of standards. And that subtle shift changes everything, because it means he chooses, not begs. The respect he commands doesn't come from words, it comes from energy. People feel it when he walks into a room, when he speaks, when he carries himself. It's the kind of respect that can't be faked, can't be bought, and can't be fabricated. It's forged in silence, in years of holding the line, in the discipline of saying no when others would say yes. And this energy forces people, especially women, to act differently around him. They adjust their tone, they weigh their words, they consider their behavior more carefully. Not because he demands it, but because his very presence demands it. This is what separates men who are respected from men who are tolerated. The strong man doesn't have to ask for better treatment. He commands it by who he has become. But here's the truth. Most men miss. This transformation isn't about women at all. It's not about getting more dates, or winning her back, or making her miss you. It's about building yourself so fully that women become a byproduct, not the mission. The irony is that when you stop chasing women and start chasing purpose, women start chasing you. They sense when a man is locked into something bigger than them, and that gravitational pull is irresistible. Yet even then, the man who has built himself doesn't get lost in the attention. He remembers the years of silence, the pain of solitude, the strength he forged alone, and because he remembers, he never compromises that strength for temporary pleasure. That's what keeps him rare. That's what keeps him powerful. By now, he's no longer even the same man he was when his journey began. The weak, needy, validation-seeking version of himself is gone, replaced by someone sharper, calmer, more focused. Women who once thought they could play with him now hesitate before even approaching. Men who once underestimated him now respect him, even if silently. And he realizes something vital: the struggle was worth it. The years of loneliness, the nights of questioning, the battles against weakness, those were not wasted seasons. They were the crucible that made him into what he is now. And standing on the other side, he sees what most men never will. That strength is never given, it is earned. And once you earn it, the world bends to you, not the other way around. As he reaches this final stage of transformation, the single strong man comes to embody something almost untouchable, a force that no heartbreak, no betrayal, no manipulation can shake. While others still chase illusions, still fold under pressure, still beg to be noticed, he stands tall in his silence. And it's that silence, that refusal to be moved, that drives women mad. Because in a world where men are constantly trying to prove themselves, his lack of effort becomes the loudest statement of all. He doesn't chase, he doesn't explain, he doesn't justify, and that restraint elevates him above the noise, making him unforgettable. By now, women realize they can't replace him. They may try to fill the void with someone else, but every attempt feels empty, every substitute feels shallow. Because no matter how many men they meet, they won't find another who radiates this level of self-possession. He's carved from discipline, built from solitude, hardened by silence. And once a woman has experienced that energy, no ordinary man can satisfy her again. That's why she will always circle back, always wonder, always regret, because deep down she knows she lost something rare, and the sting of that realization only grows sharper with time. But here's the irony: by the time she realizes it, he's already moved on. Not necessarily to another woman, but to a higher version of himself. He doesn't linger in the past, replaying memories or waiting for closure. He's too busy building, too busy creating, too busy living. And that's the ultimate revenge. Not bitterness, not anger, but progress. He leaves her behind, not by punishing her, but by thriving without her. And nothing haunts a woman more than watching a man she thought she could break become stronger after she's gone. That's when she understands she didn't just lose him, she lost the future he was building. And so the journey comes full circle. What began as a man's loneliness turns into his power. What felt like rejection turns into redirection. What once felt like the end becomes the foundation of a new beginning. He no longer sees solitude as punishment, but as preparation. He no longer views loss as failure, but as freedom. And he no longer measures his worth by who stays or who leaves, but by the standards he holds and the world he's building. This perspective shift is what separates him from the masses. While others are caught in cycles of chasing and begging, he's already 10 steps ahead, walking in a direction few have the courage to follow. The final truth is this: the longer a man stays single, the stronger he becomes, not because he avoids love, but because he learns to live without needing it. And when love does come, if it comes, he will enter it from a place of choice, not desperation. That's what makes him unbreakable, because the man who doesn't need anything cannot be controlled by anyone. His silence becomes power, his independence becomes magnetism, and his life becomes a testament to the truth. Every man eventually learns too late that the strongest version of yourself is forged, not in her arms, but in your solitude. And when you master that, you don't just win in love, you win in life.